Okay guys, today we're going to sight and a scope. Okay, so one of the first things you want to consider is where you're going to sight your scope in. So your scope is above the barrel of the gun, and the scope is going to look straight, whereas your bullet is going to curve, obviously exaggerated. So if we zoom out on a really far out scale, and we have our scope is going to be doing a perfect line, like I mentioned. And then the bullet is not. The bullet is going to be going at a curve. And so if you sight your scope in perfectly parallel to your gun, then obviously you would never have a bullet crossing. So what you're going to do is you're going to pick some point where you're going to have your scope cross. Whether that's right here at like 100 yards, whether that's 50 yards, or whether that's 25 yards or 200 yards. Okay, so you're going to pick some point where the bullet is going to cross. So it's going to depend on the type of bullet that you're going to pick, because if you were to take a high-powered hunting rifle and sight it at 25 yards, you can see that the trajectory of the bullet's actually going to cross your scope 0 point multiple times. Whereas if you're right around 100 yards, it'll pretty much only cross it once. And you don't. It's the amount it's going to cross the second time is really negligible because it's going to be pretty much flat. Now this drawing is not perfectly to scale, but you get the idea. Okay, so essentially to explain what I typically do is for a 22, it really doesn't matter. I typically do about 25 yards because honestly I'm plinking with it, so really not that big a deal. Once you get up more high power rifles, you'll really want to focus on where you're going to zero it in on. So typically on an AR, general rule of thumb is 50 yards. Now you could change it depending on what type of shooting you're doing with your AR. If you're exclusively long distance, maybe you want to do 100 yards. This scope I put on here is actually designed and has holdovers for 5.56 velocities for 50 yards zero. So this one I will be sighting in at 50 yards, and I'm going to show you that today. Okay, now on more powerful hunting rifles or distant rifles or snipers or whatever, this is where you have a little bit more leeway in where you want to zero it in. On this one, I chose 100 yards. I chose that because that's a pretty good rule of thumb for where to zero in a hunting rifle, but a lot of people choose different ones, and it's really up to personal preference. It doesn't matter. The only difference that's what's going to happen is your holdovers are going to change at different distances. So if you chose a really far out zero, your bullet's going to be way above before it passes that 0 point. So you just have to know where to hold. The nice thing about zeroing it in 100 yards is I really don't have to, as it goes out, my bullet is going to be, I'm just going to have to aim a little high between 0 and 100 yards, not much, and then at 100 yards, 0, and then I just know my bullet drops from there out. Oftentimes what I'll see is if people have scope covers, they'll even write their holdovers on a little paper and put it in. If you have time and you're doing bench rest shooting or practicing that, you can actually get an app to show you that. So anyway, let's get into zeroing this. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll get it set up pointed at something. Obviously I have the lower off. Obviously you can see there's obviously no round in the chamber, obviously, so it's safe. Okay, so what I've got the bore pointed at is that bucket clear down there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sight this in. So I'm a little bit up and to the left, and so I'm just going to change it so it's pointed exactly where looking down the bore is pointed. It'll never focus on that bucket, but trust me, it's pointed directly at that bucket. I'm not going to get too much into MOA here or MRAD or anything. For this specific thing, I'm a little bit up to the left, so I've taken off these caps, and if I twist this guy this way, it'll move it up. So I need to go down, so I'm going to move it down a few clicks, and then over here you see going that way to the right, which is the way I need to go. So I'm going to do a few clicks, and it's going to adjust it. Okay, so I know it's difficult to see, but that bucket is dead center in that reticle, and lined up with the bore. So now there's literally nothing more that I can do here. Now it's going to be taking it to the range and sighting it there. So let's go do that. Once you get to the range, you're going to pick some sort of target. There are actually targets that have individual smaller targets that really help you have a specific section that you're shooting at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this 50 yards down range, and I'm going to just pick a grid point that I'm going to shoot. I'm going to shoot 3 rounds not just 1, 3 rounds, see where I'm off, and then adjust accordingly. I'd like to do 3 to 5 rounds rather than just 1, because if you're just 1, maybe you accidentally pulled one way and then you're going to be adjusting it. It takes forever to sight it in that way. You actually use more ammo. So just shoot 3 to 5 rounds and adjust it. So let's do that. Okay, yeah, so that's pretty much how you sight in a scope. There were a couple other people at the range, so I didn't talk too much there. But essentially, I shot it, adjusted until I got to right where I was shooting in the middle and could hit a quarter at 50 yards, no problem with an AR. So yeah, if you have any other questions, tips, or tricks, or comments on how to sight in a scope, please put that in the comment section below. Okay, guys, thanks for watching.